And I couldn't agree more. Um, let's see. It's funny because Neta at one point just brought up in passing this "who is a Jew" question, and and in our talk just now, who is like who is a Pole, who is a Jew, what is our identity, national, and I think the four of us agree that we have multiple identities, multiple worlds exploring. We have that in common. I want to go back to something. So Neta, you said you in passing, you said we just read the Megillah of Ruth. You just tossed it out. We just read, and of course, I know what you're talking about. It was part of a certain Jewish holiday when we read a certain text.
Yeah, but it's not
You
a regular text. It's a text basically about women and
no no hold on.
worshiping God through the love of
Okay, we'll get there. I'll let
Naomi
you
and Ruth. Okay.
finish the question, and I'll let you go first on this. Um, so where I'm going with this, and you can jump in anywhere you want, but so you came from, you said your father was religious. Um, I don't know, I don't know really any of your exact stories of the three of you of your personal practice, and that could mean whether it's Buddhist meditation or being Shomer Shabbat, or whatever, whether it's Jewish, whether it's not, whatever, or maybe you don't think you have a personal practice. I don't know, but I'd like to ask about the connection between music for you and your personal practice. So this is not about music when we're going out on a stage. This is not about music when we're going into a recording studio. This is not about music. Um, this is about music as part of. Well, if we practice Judaism, how does your music affect your practice as a Jew? Or if you do some other practice, or maybe as Lawrence Glamberg, the singer of the Klezmatics, would say, music is his practice. So, okay, that's the question: is if you could tie together music and your practice. Neta?
So, like I started before, and I told you my story about the synagogue, my relationships with the synagogue. For me, being on stage is uh, reclaiming my place, the lost place in synagogue. I mean, when I sing. The moment before I open my mouth on the stage, I feel like the Chazan in the synagogue and the excitement around before he starts to read the Torah. So I took I mean when I sing on stage, I feel that I'm practicing Judaism in a way, because it's like soul music. It's like the thing that you do in a synagogue when you take a written text and you are transforming it into something spiritual. So for me, this is the place to connect God and the gift that He gave me, and to try also to lift up people with me into higher, dimensions. And this is the first part of your question. The other part is like when I discovered this recent music from the Atlas Mountains, I found out that also it was very useful to those women. I mean, when people died, they actually used to sing. They actually used to use the music in order to heal their souls. So I believe that practicing Judaism is also taking those moments in life that you experience. I mean, in life, in death, when you give birth, or you are campaigning, bringing someone into the end of the road. You have music for that. You have something to practice the experience uh, uh, um, of this moment. And I feel now in our contemporary life, in the life of money and and the economy, and trying to win it all. I think we lost a lot of things that could help us to survive this life, and it was exist. I mean, it used to be exist in Jewish life, and we lost those Jewish life, the life of community, the life of creating things together in in a group. Now everybody is individuals, and now you can pass the whole year and not see your neighbor. But back then the Jewish life were very different. They were together, they were practicing something not only religious, not only the rules of the Torah, not only the mitzvot. They were practicing life together, and they had ceremonies, and they had music, and they had things that they used to take from artistic worlds, but it wasn't art like you defined it today. It was part of life, and this was something that really I think I'm trying to bring back to my life and to other people's life, and it's all sources of it's Jewish knowledge. I mean, I'm not taking it from the Torah or from the things or from codex books, but I'm taking it from people who used to practice Judaism in other and different ways in the past than us.
I know we're not going to have time for everything, but it reminds me of something I wanted to talk about later, which is Lador Vador, from generation to generation, and the way that you're learning this, you're carrying it on, you teach it to the next. It positions ourselves in a continuum. Raphael, I know nothing about your life other than as an artist, actually. Is there a relationship between your music or music that you make and do you know what I mean when I say your practice? I don't even know if you practice Judaism in your way or not, or something else, or is music just music, or is it part of your uh, identity and stuff? No, that's the wrong word. It's not about identity. What is it? Practice? Is it part of does it have a functional role? There you go. Does your music have a functional role the way Neta was explaining? Like there's melodies for when you have a brit milah, the birth. There's melodies for weddings. There's melodies for the end of times. And does your music have a functional role in any of these kind of life events and stuff?
Tak jak wspomniałem.
Yes, as I said already. So the origin had to be made more tangible for me. So I had to find some connection with what I was doing, and I found it in music. So it was the first impulse to connect life with music. So all the traumas or holocausts had to be reprocessed with music. It was my own tool to do so. So my guitar was a kind of a weapon to go through that. So it started to flourish like a flower. So I had to find beautiful emotions. So not to connect my Polishness with Holocaust, but I wanted to have the mysticism of it, and Nigunim came, and the truth of Hasidic grades which I visited. It was when Hasids would not come to Poland as they do now. These were fields covered with bushes, so I would go there and record music with a recorder. I wanted to listen to the silence of the graves, and I learned from the silence. So when it comes to the connection between the Jewish identification, so it was when I had the very bad moment in my life. So I couldn't find any place for myself, and I found it on a desert in Israel, and I tried to recollect myself as a herd animal. So also it was a religious person, and I was inspired by Moses. And what inspired me in his story, it was not only the mission, but uh, it was like he had his objective, but he realized that he would not be able to see it. But in the Jewish identification, the journey, the fact of traveling and learning is something like a religion. So a journey is the greatest prayer that I can bear, and trying to reach the nigunim which are connected with the Hasidic world. So I realized that all the composers who belong to various periods in history, nigunims are permanent. They stayed in Poland like those sparks or pieces of a broken vessel, and to be presented to people who live here in contemporary times, but also to those who live in other countries. So it's a kind of hard work. And for me, it is everything that you touch in Poland, in Eastern Europe, is something like religion. And everything is a symbol. So I'm religious anyway.
Wow. The depth of each of you is astounding. Jeremiah, I want to just slightly tweak the question a little bit for you. You're a musical performer. You go out on stages, whether they're concert stages or clubs or the street. You have actually served as a chazan, as a cantor in ceremonies, and you have a family, and so therefore you do certain things at home in your personal family life. And I would get, obviously for the first two, and I'm guessing for the third, music can be part of or even the same music can be part of all these three things. Something you do in a concert, something you do when you're being the chazan in a ritual, and something you do at home with family. Is it different for you? And if so, how? If you could sort of talk about, is there a difference for you when you're doing the same music, but whether it's for a concert or for a service where you're the cantor, or at home with family and community?
In all three contexts, you're seeking something, and you can find that at times, and other times you're less fortunate. But the goal is always to be attaching yourself to something that's beyond yourself, and accessing the ghosts or the spirits, and I think in the kind of a prayer service, that's sort of it's the ritual experience there is I would say I almost feel like I can't really comment on it, but something is happening. Sometimes a very profound and beautiful thing happens, right, where you're speaking with more than your own voice, and that is, I think, ultimately the goal. Right? I'm trying to make a space in myself for people who I love and who I learned from and who are no longer here, and then that that taps into the issues in in Jewish kind of mystical discourse about, you know, how can you do it? You know, what in what ways able to become a channel for these spirits to enter the world. And there are two different forms, right, that the Kabbalists talk about. One is the dibuk, right, a dibuk, where a spirit enters you without your choice, with your will. And sometimes this can be very traumatic and destructive, but in other cases, you know, it's maybe there's some kind of value, right, to things happening that you can't control. It's from who need to speak coming into you against your will, and they can do some kind of work through. And then the other form of spirit possession that is sometimes spoken the ibur, which is like an impregnation. And the idea is that this one is more volitional, that you have more say about what spirit is going to come into you, this context. And so there were, you know, there are manuals about how to go to a certain grave of a saint. I was thinking about that with Neta's stories about the women on pilgrimage, right? That people on pilgrimage sometimes would lay down on the graves and invite the spirits of the speak and to enter them. So trying to open myself to the possibility of being used, making myself abject to the spirit world, and then also trying to, you know, cultivate practice that will allow me to be able to speak with multiple voices that I invite into myself. And whether that be by listening to music, you know, to listening to old records, or, you know, practicing the sound of my voice with the sounds of old records. You know, in my, you know, I grew up where we there's something like very prosaic almost about this, like, you know, it was just what we did. We sat at the table singing Smiris on you know, with my grandfather on Shabbos, and you know, the Passover Seder each year was this kind of like concert, you know, with the family singing, you know, till late in the night or early in the morning. So those are very important shaping memory that I'm always trying. I would say that the work I'm doing as a creative musician, you know, in concert contexts, and, you know, the services are that I'm in. It's not. I don't want to misrepresent it. I'm not like going into a synagogue and working as a cantor in a classic sense. You know, the services that I work in are always some kind of like alternative Jewish culture style version of where I'm there with a band usually. I mean, I would love to try to work as a of the old style, but that's not very likely. I mean, there just aren't really outlets for that so much. There are very, very few, and I would have to really focus on cultivating that if I was going to do it, which is probably unlikely. Although, who knows? We'll see what happens. I'm trying to create musical texts that are going to make people be able to feel the music the way I feel about it. You know, that it has the weight of memory and history, and that has this kind of like raucous, uncontrolled kind of quality. Like, this is something that's going to happen. We're gonna get into this whether you want to or not. This party is happening, and so those ways of thinking about it are all present in the way I approach the music as a performance, and I don't differentiate that strongly. If I'm singing, you know, like Avinu Malkeinu Zachor, if it's in a bor at a festival stage, or if it's in a synagogue, you know, for the high holidays, it's sort of the same to me, I would say.
It's funny because I just have to tell you that I sort of agree with you in my own life, but I've been playing for years with the question, if I'm on a stage, and this has happened, and let's say, for example, I'm with our project Nigunim with Lawrence Glamberg, and we're performing Nigunim in a concert hall. Is it a better performance if we actually play the music really well and hit all the right notes, and I don't crack, and my embouchure is good and my sound is good, and, you know, everything like that? Or is it a better performance if it's maybe sloppy and maybe there's inaccuracies, but actually we actually get taken and possessed by the music? If we're actually really so in it that we become a channel, which happens. And I sometimes think, Well, yeah, maybe that's a better performance because it's real. But on the other hand, I might not want to listen to a recording of that. I think about this.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, what do you want to listen to? A studio recording or like a field recording, right? There are two different aesthetics. And I spent a lot of time listening to field recordings. I mean, I would say that's maybe 5% of my music listening is, either professional folklorists or so much of music on the internet now is field recordings in one way or another. And I don't know. I like it. I mean, if it's dirty and messed up, like that's life. But not to say that studio records don't have an important place. I mean, that's our frame of reference for how to present music. And another question.
All right. Let's go on because time is flying beautifully. And let's talk about something that came up. I was putting us off from it, but talk about women, about sexism, about gender. And of course, this is a question that lives, as everything we're talking about lives, on multiple levels. It lives in a mystical zone. It lives in a very real, what we call realpolitik, meaning the facts on the ground. It lives in many zones. And so I'll try to get to a good question, but what I want to talk about, okay, sexism it's a worldwide phenomenon. It always has been. Discrimination based on gender, on gender identity, has always been this. That's omnipresent. Discrimination in every sense of the word. And then you have the particular Jewish aspects of it, which have to do with all the laws, all the Jewish laws and all the Jewish traditions that separate men's roles and women's roles and where they're based on and the differences. And also, of course, we can't, as musicians, not talk about the laws about Kol Isha, the restrictions on men hearing women's voices. And then we're in a world right now which talks about why are we only talking about two genders. I know this is a rambling statement, but we'll try to pull it all together. More than just two genders, and we talk about LGBTQ, and we talk about people using the plural pronoun they and gender fluidity. And I'm recalling something I learned years ago, but don't have the sources now, that in ancient Jewish texts, there are more than two genders. There's more than just male and female. And I know that in some mystical Jewish texts from thousands of years ago, there are actually names for 4 or 5 different genders beyond male and female. So this has always been with us in society. And we know that within Judaism and within other religions, often when they differentiate between men's roles and women's roles and men and women as identity, there's even posited the idea that there is some mystical difference between masculine and feminine. So it's a huge topic. I think you know what I'm talking about. Now let's try to get a good question. I could just say, let's talk about that. I had a specific question for the guys, which you'll understand why I'm not asking you this question, Neta. So let me start with this for Raphael and Jeremiah. Would you perform at a festival that prohibited women singers or prohibited women performers from being in that stage? I'm going to start there. It's a very it's missing it's excluding the whole mystical side, and we're going into the practical political for a second. We'll go beyond this very quickly. Jeremiah?
No. Do you want me to approach the other things you were talking about? I mean, you know, if the you're talking about like Jewish the festival. Well, first of all, they wouldn't want me anyway. My stuff's too weird, and anyway, I have women singers working with me, you know, half the time. I mean, it's I would say probably no, but I mean, I work with people who are involved in that kind of scene a lot, and you know, there are all kinds of issues that come up. It's part of the world that I do research about as a scholar. So I think a lot. I mean, basically, like, well, you brought up 3 different areas: the practical aspect of women being abused, you know, and I grew up with that as just normal in my family. I mean, like, even though my family was moving away from Oxy, even in my parents' generation, and my grandparents' generation, rather. The kind of the sedimented belief that women are not appropriate vessel for Jewish sacred music was just kind of part of the scene, and you know, there was no sense that my grandfather was going to train my mother cousin, who's a girl, you know, to be cantors. And you know, it's horrible. I mean, our family is damaged from this. So I hope that will change, and I'm seeking actively to change that. And then there's the second aspect, which is that the kind of the concept of male voices, and the duality of male and female in Jewish music, which has been also kind of, you know, locked in place through the teachings of certain rabbis, and I think that the cantor's voice, at least in the Ashkenazi cantorial tradition that I'm versed in, men are always seeking to embody femininity through their vocal practices, to in some way to include that which is obviously violently being cut off from what is needed in order to have a complete representation of human experience and communication to the divine. And I see that in a lot of the vocal practices. There's the use of falsetto, this kind of like a kind of androgynous kinds of things that cantors use. And then finally, there's just the question of like, oh, well, is it really true? I mean, were women actually excluded from sacred practices? And Neta research shows that obviously that was not the case. The women had their own musical sacred music culture, and in the Ashkenazi world where the kind of the common answer is, oh, you know, cantorial music is male music. I think that's false. I mean, we can see from the quote unquote golden age period of cantorial music in the early 20th century, when the great records were made of the genre. There were a lot of women who were singing cantorial music. You know, if you look at old Yiddish newspapers, there were women performing as cantors in Yiddish theater, dressed as men oftentimes, but performing in this kind of androgynous kind of third genders. And I seek to understand the history of this and the social context of it better as a scholar, but from a standpoint of an artist, I believe that I'm getting closer to like start calling me they. I'm not really going to do that because I feel like I'm too old and people will think I'm just trying to draw attention to myself. And basically, I feel like I need change in terms of the way gender has played a role in my life and my music, and I want his voice in me also. And I mean, she shaped me, and and I miss her and I need her in there also when I'm singing. And I'm trying to figure out ways to do that. It's not this, but I believe that that there's a path towards it, or that thinking about it and talking about it get clearer.
I just want to point out for everyone watching this that Jeremiah just briefly alluded to a great artist, a great person who we just lost recently, who was a collaborator with both of us, but much more intimately with Jeremiah, the great Julia Eisenberg, one of the most powerful singers. In fact, she was at the Krakow Festival when we did the ARC project together. Just an unbelievable artist, spiritual, mystical, feminist, every radical. Just the world is diminished by her loss, by our loss, and her absence. And I love that you're saying that you want to sort of incorporate her voice into your voice. That feels so important to me. So a moment for Julia Eisenberg. Raphael, what do you think about this stuff with our...
No dla mnie jakby osobiście
Well, for me personally, there has never been a problem that I could deconstruct the world into genders. So for me, it didn't matter whether we had more or less to say as representatives of the two genders. But similarly, as in that case, as I mentioned, I was born in Frankfurt am Main, which was a crazy town, a crazy city. So perhaps it doesn't look like that anymore, but at that time it was full of various minorities and many freaks who were outcasts of the normal society. And one of such people, it was my aunt, who was transsexual. She was a man, so she would sit me on her lap. She would smoke cigarettes. She was dressed as a woman and speaking with a male voice. So I was used to the situation when a gender was not so definite. So I had no prejudice about it. And at some point, I had around me a lot of lesbians and gays, and also my colleagues who enjoyed dressed up as women. So, but I believe that it should be more tolerated and emphasized, because some of them did have a problem with discrimination, and perhaps they would find themselves in a different gender. So when I was interested in the ancient history, I read about it a lot. So I believe that we are sort of backward. So in Poland, you probably heard that our national Catholic government banned abortion almost completely, and there is a great debate about it even, and there are many people who are against it. There were large protests against it and demonstrations. And when I look at the young generation and my 17-year-old daughter and 13-year-old son, and even my son has colleagues who say that they are neither male or female, that they are someone else. So those completely idiotic government, which is now in Poland, actually speeded up our return to normality and freedom in the choice of who we are. So I believe that it's really interesting. And because we have a melting pot in Poland, and the changes are really fast, and they are also quite positive from the social point of view, that people are more open and more open in talking about it. Would I perform at such a concert? No, certainly not. But my colleagues from Israel had such a problem when they went to the Republic of South Africa, where such concerts were played. So only for white people, and the majority of them were male. So it was really strange as a climate. So if I played in an Arabic country, I would also wonder, because it's so this drawback of any monotheistic religion, which which rejects people from being immersed in religion. So there is a lot of injustice towards women, which is present in every monotheistic religion. So let me remind you that in Poland, women in the countryside before the Second World War, they would wear their heads covered like in Arabic countries. So there is some continuity, and I hope that we are not moving backwards. And I would like to return to ancient Greece and not to developed in some developed towards orthodoxy, towards other genders.
Thank you. Amazing stories yet again, Raphael. Neta, I assume that you have a lot to say, and I probably don't need to ask anything except say, talk to us. But I'm trying to think if there's anything in particular I could ask about this that might, I don't know, that might give us something special. I mean, I should just say, talk to us. But here's what I'd like to ask, and if I'm totally wrong, just say, no, you're wrong, and say whatever you want, because that'll be more than enough. I get the feeling that part of you embraces, especially in a Jewish and mystical context, these separations of women's sphere and men's sphere. And you love the traditions. Like you might have felt so strange that you couldn't go up and read from the Torah, but on the other hand, then you find these other women's traditions, and you're attracted to them. So I don't know. Maybe there's an ambivalence between this. Do you feel like, on one hand, we, the collective we, who whatever that is, should be working to break down things like the restrictions of Kol Isha, or do you think that we should take a different approach to it? I don't know. Basically, talk about this issue, but that's the question. Sort of.
I won't make it long because we haven't.
It's okay.
Yeah, but you this time you're right. I mean, something in me is not like willing to change all this concept of separation. I mean, I can enjoy men or male chorus singing together, and I'm still enjoying it in the holidays when I go to the synagogue and listen to you to you guys pray together. And I mean, it's art, and it's a medium inside the multiple world of arts and music. But for me, I mean, the only thing that scratches my heart still when I observe you guys from the outside, I'm asking myself, so where is my tribe? I mean, you have your tribe. The encounter is the counter is the chief of the tribe, and where is my tribe? Where is my? I mean, why don't I have my own synagogue with the same women voice all together singing separately from men? I mean, it's just an idea that crossed my mind 1 year ago. Why not establish women synagogues? That in that in that case you're not losing the artistic experience of one gender singing together in one big voice, and you still have the freedom to to be together with your own with your own kind. I mean, it's something that is very it's very useful. I mean, I see you guys when you go to the synagogue Friday. I mean, you need your own gathering. It's okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. The only problem is that no one is caring about our place. I mean, the moment Jewish life, I mean, I'm talking about it like that because in Israel it's a living, kicking problem. I mean, it's not something that we discuss. Jewish tradition used to be like that. No, it's still happening. I mean, we don't until now we're seeking the place of the woman inside the Jewish life, and I'm talking about Orthodoxy especially because. A lot of other zramim,
denominations.
Yeah, for example, from immigrants from America, and so they already have options, but I'm confessing now that I still don't feel very convenient in those new options. I still feel that I kind of missing the way it used to be, but maybe I just want to make it to find my own tribe, to find my own group of people that wants to pray with me from my own gender, and to make something like a mirror to the other to the men's synagogues, and then we can go together back home and to eat together, and of course the family celebration. I insist that also in Jewish life, I mean, also in North Africa, it always used to be together. I mean, when you sing on the table of Yom Shishi, of Friday, the Holy Friday meal, I mean, it has to be together. And but this one thing, I mean, it's like the stage of Once Upon a Time. The synagogue is the stage of the old times, and this is something that we need to figure out still yet, because it's not obvious that we need to erase all this tradition and make it something mixed up, and we still need to figure it out. And for me as an artist, I love the way things happens in the synagogue. I mean, I love to hear vocal music. I love it when you don't have any plugged and electricity around, and you have to use your own basic talent, to hit the table with your body and to use the voice, and everything is so natural. And for me, if you asked before, what am I practicing in Judaism? So I really love to not use electricity in Shabbat, and not to go to the social media, and just to be, to try to be a basic human being. Something is really, it is happening every time you make yourself these conditions. Some other things burst from your body. That's why I really liked your description about being part of an experience, even though your voice is a bit rusty and you're not 100% in your best performance, but still when the art is part of life. So I believe it's something that Judaism is still keeping in our lives.
I am both so happy that the four of us are together in this talk, but I'm very saddened by one little thing. And when you talked about coming home and sitting at the table, the only thing I could wish right now is that the four of us were having this discussion at a table, and right around now, I personally would take out a bottle of vodka or Slivovitz or Arak or something, but that's not necessary. But we would sing a niggin together right now, and we would do a piyut, and we would not only be talking about this without actually doing it, and the Zoom would not allow us. I could say, let's sing something together. It would be a disaster. Let's just say, Lashana Haba, either Berushalayim or Bakrakov. Next year, I hope we're singing together, because I feel the need for this with all this talking. We're going to close up. So I'm gonna totally change to a much more light, fun question as our closing question of this wonderful discussion, and then we'll say goodbyes and everything. So the whole idea of this discussion was to look as you know, we represent different cultures, different traditions, different musics. We've all been to this Krakow Festival of Jewish Culture, which has been presenting a, a whole diversity of Jewish music since the very beginning. Even though it's Polish, it is not strictly Ashkenazic or Hasidic. I mean, they had Shlomo Bar from almost the first festival, just as one example out of many. Flori Yagoda, the great Sephardic singer who also just passed away, and she is dearly missed. Okay. And I'm going to say something. This is probably for my American, for the Americans listening. My favorite author as a little kid was Dr. Seuss, who wrote children's books. And one of his books was called If I Ran the Zoo. And it's all rhyming. If I ran the zoo, here's what I'd do. And the kid imagines all the different animals that would be in his zoo. If you were programming the next Festival of Jewish Culture, who would you want to invite? Who would you want to see on the stage of a wonderful, your dream? You're the artistic director. You're programming it. Who would you put on that stage? Neta, who would you put on that Krakow stage? Neta Elkayam presents.
I wish we could bring. I mean, it also could be imaginary. I mean, from the past.
Oh, okay. You know what? I didn't mean that, but yes, go for it. Go for it. Why not? Yes, absolutely.
I wonder how Miriam Hanevia voice sound like.
I was thinking the same thing the other day.
Because she was singing the song of the sea, you know, and it's really poetic, and it's the first time in the Bible like a woman voice is mentioned, and she took the drum and she was singing, and everybody were like joining her. So I would really it was really amazing to see this, to witness this ceremony on Krakow Jewish Festival.
Okay, I love that answer. Let me just push you a little bit. Name a few of your favorite artists alive now, if this is possible. You don't have to. In this great big world of what we call Jewish music, who are some of the people who excite you these days? Just because this broadens all of our minds. And you never know who's listening because this might end up on the stage. So
there is my hero, my Michael Jackson, like my Moroccan Michael Jackson. His name is Chaim Boutboul, and he's over 90. He lives in Paris now, and he's the first man to bring inside the Moroccan music the electric guitar, and to sing in a way that nobody did it, like very rockistic, and I love his interpretations to a lot of tunes from the 50s, 60s. He's still alive. Unfortunately, most of there were brothers who were creating this music together. They recently died, one of them from Corona, and the other one just 2 months after that. And now he's very lonely, and I think it would be amazing to give him, the last opportunity to celebrate his heritage. And I don't know if it could.
Fantastic.
This is
Jeremiah. Who would be on the Jeremiah Festival?
Oh, well, that would be really fun. I mean, I've people whose work I love who either haven't been at the festival or have been there, but in a supportive role. Well, I was certain, people who I work with a lot, like Yoel Cohen, who's a wonderful young cantor. I'd love to see him kind of in collaboration, maybe with like Slavic Soul Party or some kind of like a Eastern European style brass band backing up a Hasidic cantor. That's a brain joke that I'm trying to. trying to push out into the world. It's something for Yoel, because he's an interesting, beautiful guy who's his career poses certain very specific challenges from a Hasidic background, but is no longer identifies as part of the community. But so yeah, Judith Berkson, man, like she's one of my favorite artists, and love to see her bringing whatever she wants. You know, she does so many different brilliant things. Young artist, Israeli living in America, who just presented a project on the poetry of on Yiddish poetry, early 20th century Yiddish poetry. Anat Spiegel, brilliant young composer. Eden Derso, hip hop star from Israel. I see her on the main stage there. Would be fantastic, really exciting. Anthony Russell, his record with Varetsky Pass was fantastic. He's such a brilliant guy, beautiful human being, and great scholar about Yiddish music, and bringing the perspective of African American Jews, which I don't think that's been particularly heard at the Krakow Festival. Okay, that's probably enough for now. But yeah, I've got some ideas.
Janusz is writing.
I know. Raphael, who would you program on something like this?
Ja przede wszystkim poza
First of all, apart from names, I would like to try to open the possibility of people like we with Frank. We co-created a new program from the scratch. I would like to connect people who performed already at the festival, but they created something new which would make a lot of sense and would be very well performed and referred to various traditions. And I would like to connect musicians from Israel, Africa, and Poland. Names are less interesting, but what Jennifer, Chart, Lamar, and Fortuna, I'm always interested in their music. They have made 2 records so far only, but I keep waiting for the new recordings. And I'm really interested in Svitlana Nyanyo, a Ukrainian singer who is one of the greatest performers. We sometimes play together in a duet, but I would like to see her interpretation of Jewish culture. Also recently passed away Gedalia Tazartes, who was a great model for me in connection with Jewish culture. It was a person who lived in Paris, a Jew coming from Turkey, who made vocal installations, but I tried to play with him, but we were never successful, but we smoked cigarettes in Sweden and talked for a whole evening, so it was like playing together. You also asked about what I listened to, so it's a complete mixture. So I jotted it down to help myself, but as we play together is some kind of stylistic schizophrenia, which I call. So we listen to music from Senegal, Gelevar de Banjul. It is a band which influenced me as an artist, and they're always with me. Similarly as from Israel, Sasha Argov from Israel, Alfred Schnittke, a composer from Russia, or Gesualdo di Venosa, on whose grave I visited last year during holidays. But I also listen to Jewish kitsch music, which reminds me of my childhood years. Yaakov Shapiro, who came from Israel, but he was from also Eastern Europe, who would sing typical. Also, Jeremiah's placed a cantor quoted a cantor who sang in Buenos Aires, and I never wrote to Jeremiah, but the place where he was born is close to Warsaw. So when he posted a post with this cantor, I was there at that time. So I listen also to what you post, and also I look forward to the projects of Haviva Pedaya from Israel. She's a great personality. So she's not a musician, but at some point she created a team, Hayone, and they played in Krakow at the festival, and it was my own encounter with contemporary Israeli mysticism, which also influenced me a lot.
So this is great, and as you said, I hope Janusz Machuch is writing this down. I just want to add one more to this list that you all made, which I've been thinking of for the last half hour, which is a trio with two guitars and a voice of Raphael Roginski and Jeremiah Lockwood and Neta Elkayam. And I just picture you sitting in a room with just two guitars. Well, maybe there'd be five different guitars, electric and acoustic, and other instruments, but just the three of you and singing songs. And I think it would actually come close, Raphael, to one of the things you mentioned about bringing together Poland and Africa, because both you and Jeremiah have very strong West African musical roots, and Neta has her North African musical roots. Israel, so and the arranger and producer in me would love to actually record the trio of the three of you. So I think that's a beautiful place to leave this. Thank you all so much for sharing incredible thoughts and stories. And I feel elevated by this conversation. I feel like I know each of you better than I did before. I hope everyone else viewing does. I hope they're all curious to check out all of your music. I'm sure there's a RaphaelRoginski.com and a NetaElkayam.com and a JeremiahLockwood.com, and they can find your music everywhere. And and we have to thank and acknowledge the incredible team of the Krakow Festival of Jewish Culture, which has been going on for over 30 years, 33 years. And in this particular iteration now, and for many years, Robert Gadek and Katarzyna Weitra, and of course, founder and artistic director Janusz Machuch. You all do an incredible job bringing our world together and making these things happen. Thank you all very much.